Alright, in this tutorial we're going to jump into After Effects CS5, and this is definitely what we need to be using because without this we will not have this incredibly awesome Roto Brush tool. Usually Roto Brush, Roto Painting, or just Roto Scoping will give you a headache because you got to take so much long time doing, especially with an insane shot like what we have for shot number 2 with our actor running around like crazy. So I want to go ahead and first make sure under Preferences, under Import, like I said before, Sequence Footage 23976 as import settings. This will dictate what happens when we bring it down and make it an actual comp. So I'm going to go ahead and import again, and we're going to go ahead and bring in the uncompressed file, shot number 2, uncompressed. And we want to make sure we're going to frame 1 on that. So to target sequence, we'll go ahead and implement that, hit straight, and then drag it right down here to make it a new comp. All right. So again, if we come to the end here, we should have, as we had before, 142 frames and so forth. Or I'm sorry, not 142 frames, but 300 and let's see what we have. I completely forgot already. 340 frames. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of come through here and we're going to start using our Roto Brush. Now the way you use Roto Brush is not in the actual comp, but in the actual file itself. So the way you do that is you kind of like double click on the actual file itself inside of your queue. So we're not in the comp, as you can see, we're actually kind of in the file itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this Roto Brush, and I'm going to show you how this works. You can hold down Alt and you get negative, and right now you get positive. And if you want to, you can scale the actual size of your brush by, just kind of show you really quick here, by holding down Control and dragging left and right. So as you can see from what I just drew, I'll go ahead and just paint the green here. It's going to automatically kind of make its way around our actor here. This is absolutely awesome stuff. And you can see as I hit the brush for negative, it takes stuff away. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of come through here, add some of his arm. And we're teaching the computer, in the same way we taught SynthEyes, we're actually teaching the computer, hey, this is what I want rotoed, blah, blah, blah. This is what I don't want. So I'll go ahead and come in here, and it's going to be a little difficult in these areas because we've got such a similar color. In fact, I should have told my actor to bring clothes that aren't too obviously matching with the ground, but we're going to be able to just fight with that and see what happens. So I'll kind of come in here like so. So then we'll just come in here and get this area right here. And then we got this little pocket here and a little bit there. All right, so that's pretty quick for just a real quick roto. I mean, you have to admit that's pretty fast. So let's go ahead and just kind of go through the frames here and see what happens to this. So I'm going to go ahead and bring down my window a little bit here, extend these out so I can see a little bit better what's going on. Because it's going to start to change and we're going to have to kind of tweak this out as we go along. It's not a one-stop shop here, as you might think. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the space bar and move on to frame number 2. Here we can see some artifacts from the rolling shutter tool. I definitely want to come in here and be careful. And I use my space bar, kind of come in here and get what I can. And I'm not going to worry too much about everything because the harvester really isn't going to be a big deal on the feet area, but he will be an area around the head because the harvester is kind of going over the actor, and really the harvester will be up here. We should be more concerned with the head itself in this circumstance. I'm going to come over here, and I think I'm going to leave that hair issue alone. So again, go ahead and move a frame ahead here. And the computer is slowly learning, as you can see. It's slowly getting a hang of it. At the same time, you got to kind of push it back a few times. Say, hey, no, don't go there. And it can be temperamental sometimes. This isn't, you might be like, oh, this is easy. You don't have to roto anymore. There's still jobs out there for roto, and one of which is just the work that you're going to have to do here. But this is so, you might complain even by looking at this, but believe me, this is fast stuff. It's rotoscoping everything for me, so I don't even have to do anything here. So I'm going to move on to the next frame. And as you can see, it's slowly starting to learn. And again, I'll leave that hair issue up there. I can come back to it if I need to. And I'll just kind of tweak that in a little bit. And what's great about After Effects, it has post tweaks such as Refine Matte inside the tool, which will help us in kind of getting this jittery look fixed. So I'm hitting the spacebar, undoing hitting the spacebar, and what I want to do is I probably want to zoom in a little bit here to where, as far as I've been, we can kind of come through and play our animation. And this is a little bit strange area. It's his pants and so forth. It's kind of hard to tell what's what actually, but still it's doing a pretty good job for something that has the same color. I mean, look at that. It's picking up that edge right there. That's crazy. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So as you can see, this is a pretty straightforward process. It's not something that you'd be like, you know, okay, I'm confused. How does this work? And so forth. So I'm going to go ahead and roto the rest of this, and we'll come back and just see what we get. So I'll go ahead and save this, After Effects files, and we'll call this rotobrush_1. All right, so I went ahead and rotoed for the entire scene here, and I want to make sure that my in point and my out point is at the full extent of the actual composition. Now what I want to do is go ahead and say composition, add to render queue, and come over to my render queue. So I'm going to go delete this old one here, but this is the one right here that we created. And for the output module, we're going to go ahead and choose a Targa with a RGB plus alpha. So we're going to use a Targa sequence, and we'll go ahead and leave it at 32 and hit OK. And then for the actual name, we're going to go ahead and name this Shot 2 Proxy. And we'll go ahead and put a dot right here. And what this is going to do is it'll give us 3 numerical values. We don't go over 999 as far as the frame range. We're somewhere around 300. So it'll just make 3 actual numbers, but we want to make sure we isolate again that numerical value from the actual name, or else Maya will not pick it up. Be very careful and just look to see in your output what exactly it is you're outputting, and you want to see that it's nicely outputted, or isolated I should say, as you can see here. So what you can also do, by the way, before we start rendering this, you can see here on our little comp, there's these buttons for alpha, for the pink line, and then you can get a nice red overlay. I always like the pink because it's just a lot easier to see. So I'm going to go ahead and back up a little bit, and we're going to go ahead and start rendering this. So under the render queue, I'll just go ahead and hit render. By the way, as far as my output and where it's at, it's under my plates. So I'm going to definitely make sure I save it there and hit render. First thing you're going to notice is we have a very, very, very rough and rugged comp here. It's very jello-ish running around. There's a few settings that we can change inside of the actual effect itself to get rid of jittering and to sort of blend and blur the edges. But I want a really, really rough alpha for when we go into Maya, because this is just a preview for us to have a foreground mask inside of Maya for now. In the future, we'll return to this and just do a little bit of refinement of what we can do with the edges. But I like to just get my rough edge kind of put out so that when I'm working in Maya, I could start to see if there's any areas that I need to go in and kind of work on the actual roto paint or any kind of rotoscoping in general. So this is going to take a while, so I'll just go ahead and stop the video here, and when we return, we'll be jumping over into Maya. Alright, so we're back in Maya with scene build _8, and the first thing I want to do is select my perspective camera, because I went ahead and put that animation on to show you, and grab a hold of all our channels here and just say break connection, so we can get rid of that animation that we did. I'm currently at frame 143, where all of the fun begins here with the second shot. So what I want to do is I want to duplicate this image plane. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into my Hypershade, and under my cameras, I'm going to go ahead and grab this little node here, camera _0. Even though this is for camera 2, I'm going to grab this one. Obviously, this is the picture, and graph input outputs. What we have here is the image plane, which I'll just go ahead and double click, and we have it with the set offset of about -142. So we want to just duplicate this. Now we could do a couple things. We can go ahead and edit, duplicate shading network or without network. I find this to be a bit of an issue, so we want to do duplicate without network. And that creates another one here, so I'll middle mouse drag that down. So right now we just have this kind of duplicate. I'll go ahead and show you the difference between the two. This one right here, and still has the offset and so forth. but we want to change this to the actual targa sequence. Remember, we have two proxies. We have proxies JPEGs and proxy targas. So I'm going to go ahead and switch that over to shot underscore prox2 underscore proxy. And we're going to choose the first frame, which is a targa, and go ahead and open. So what you see here is the alpha version of the guy. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. Make sure this is set to RGBA. And we should have identical results here, as you can see. And just to kind of update this, you can turn this off and turn it back on again, and it should update as far as the image number, as you can see here. So just to double check it, you want to actually play through to see that this little dude is moving. So I'm going to move to frame 158. And as you can see, he's not really moving too well. And that could be an expression problem. I find this to be kind of an issue here. So I'll go ahead and look at the expression for the image number here, and I'll just grab it. So I'll go ahead and hit Control C, and I'll just jump over here. As you can see, it's not kind of kicking in. So we have to kind of say create new expression and so forth, and we're going to Control V paste this. But right now this has got a different name. It's not camera 01 plane. We got to add basically a 1 and say create. So now we're back in business because the actual purple color is in here. So this is just a common error glitch inside of Maya. You basically have to recreate the extension here inside and just set it up, because just by clicking use image sequence off and on is not going to actually fix it. As you can see here, these two are kind of synced up. Let's go ahead and kind of play through. Watch for the animation. They should be exactly the same. That's what you want to do before you jump in here and basically start going to work. Now, if I go ahead and grab this and this right here, and I just go ahead and say graph input output, you can kind of see now each one has a time figure attached with an expression that correctly works. So what I want to do now is I want to jump back to frame 143 where all the fun begins. So I'll go right about there. And we're going to do what's called just offset of the image plane. Now right now we have two image planes right on top of each other. You can't even see them. So what I want to do is I want to grab the camera, find that second image plane, which is camera 01 plane 1. We're going to change the depth. And we're going to keyframe this to match up with the moving box. You don't have to necessarily do this. If you just want to, you can probably just set this to maybe 3, and that'll move your image plane to the front here, and you can just leave it there. But what I like to do is have an animated dude kind of run around. It kind of looks cool for presentation-wise, but it's also just for us to know where he is in this scene without having a box to look at. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to hold down, put my little cursor here, hold on Control and left drag, mouse drag with my left mouse button back and forth until he grows about the size of the box. This is not going to change anything in the camera. It's always going to stay the same. This is just for show and tell. So I'm going to right click and say set key. And then we're going to go ahead and move a couple frames forward here to maybe 200. We got to find Mr. Box. It's being animated. So there it is. And you'll notice as I go ahead and keep kind of moving him forward, he'll always be bumping into that box. So I'll go ahead and hit set key. And there's a point where he eventually stops. So I just want to go ahead, set key. So he's officially in sort of a sitting stance right now. And as we continue to move here, though, the image plane continues to move. So you got to kind of just animate this the best you can. It's going to be floating around in the perspective view, but through the camera, it's just going to be fine. So I'm just, again, making it until it intersects with the geometry of the actual animated box, which is the character moving. So I'll go ahead and do that again here. And I'll just come to the very end of the shot and hit set key. Now you can kind of go through and just basically jump into your animation editor, graph editor here. And if you look at your actual camera and say select, here's your depth node, you can hit F and you can see where the keyframes are at. So I can probably want to get the in-betweens here. So just make sure obviously he's not lined up there. So I'll kind of back him up a little bit, hit set key. And I'm just setting little keyframes here in the in-betweens. And that looks fine. That looks fine. That's a little off. So I'm going to come in here and back them off a little bit and say set key. And in between here. And again, we're way off. He's kind of ahead of himself there. We're behind. So I'm going to drag him out until he hits the intersection, hits that key. Again, this is just for sake of show off. It's really not something that you got to be too crazy about. So we're kind of back to the beginning here, and what we eventually have here is kind of like this curve here. And if you want to, you can take these curves, set them to linear. You'd rather have them linear so everything works out. And you basically go ahead and kind of scroll through it really quick and see how you're doing. And one thing we could do is we can kind of pull this up and just bring this to 143 in the frame range. And we can do a really quick play blast if we want to. So in order to do that, I'll go ahead and take this box and template it so that we can get it kind of, want to see it, but we don't want to kind of get in the way. So here's the actors, and we'll just go ahead and template it. Let's see if I can kind of find a decent view here where he starts. And we'll go ahead and do a play blast from here. So I'll go ahead and do play blast. All right, so what we get in the end here on this play blast, and I did a little animation just to help us see, is just a visual representation of where the character is at in the scene, which is kind of nice. So you can go with that cube, or you can go with this little image plane, depending on what your flavor is. Now you might notice there's a little bit of a flash here, as you can see right about here. That's just a typical video card issue when you have plane on plane, and that just doesn't mean anything's wrong. It just means that you probably need a better video card. So like I said, just all depends, but just really nice to have a little visual icon of the guy in there. And where this really comes in handy, why we went through all this work, is if we go to our second camera and we kind of pull back to the first frame here, see if I can go back, we now have this nice mask eaten in here, so that if we were to move around this actual harvester, we now have an actual location where we can kind of set everything and not really have to worry about the fact that kind of guesstimate where he's at. We know where he visually is in this scene, and we can have him interact with this shovel and so forth as he kind of runs through it. So the next step after this is for us to start to get into animation and so forth. So I'm going to go ahead and save this as scene build _9.